Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Cody, thanks for coming in, brother. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you letting me on. It's
a
pleasure to be here, and I'm jazzed about it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yourself and another individual reached out after an episode a few weeks ago, and it was like, okay, maybe that was a good one.
Well,
you know?
For sure.
And it's like, all right, let's do this. So that's actually one of my. It's weird. Like, I love talking to people, but I don't know if it's the imposter syndrome or what it is. Yeah. But when I reach out to a person, I'm like, you almost go to that, like, you know, a child trying to get, like, you know, a compliment from their dad or approval from their dad or something. Like, would you like to come on my show and do this? You know, it's like, it's so scary. It's intimidating. And it's like, it's a real shameful feeling that I have. And I'm trying to get through that. So when you and this other person reached out, like, hey, I'd love to come on. I'm like, oh, that is way better for me personally. Cause I was like, yes, like, let's do this. And so I felt no guilt. Like, I didn't reach out to anybody, and I was like, all right, yeah, Cody's coming on.
It's good to step out of your comfort zone. So that's why I felt it would be good and fun to do. I've always wanted to do this, and it's good to have people get to know you. And, you know, the last thing that you and Eric on the last episode were talking about was riding the wave of life in style, I think is how he put it. And one of my favorite authors is Carl Jung, right? And he puts it the same way. He says that the difference between a good life and a bad life is how you walk through the fire. And I love that. I always love that. And so for me, how I personally walk through the fire is that I've always had this personal mantra that everything in life is either a good time or a good story. And I'm a great storyteller. I've always loved to be a good storyteller. And this in the last couple of years, I've added something to that. And I've always had that as my mantra since in high school. But I've added something that not only is everything in life either a good time or a good story, but you can always rewrite that story. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we tell ourselves these stories that we believe in our head over time that aren't necessarily true. And that, you know, you tell yourself, oh, I can't do that, or I'm afraid of that, or whatever. The reality is that you're just looking for comfort. And somebody on your podcast, I think it was Carrie, said something like, why are we trying to die safe?
Yeah.
No, you know, I mean, like, you got to step out of your comfort zone. And every time I find myself in complacency, that's more dangerous to me than when you're actually moving forward. You got to always be doing the work and reading every day and, you know, waking up in gratitude and all of those things that if I don't do for a period of time, then I find myself falling out of place again and falling into, you know, mental health issues or whatever it is. So it's like a constant thing. We never arrive at anything in life. We never, achieve where we want to be. It's always in the journey, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. That's just kind of the framework that I come from in terms of the way I look at life. And it's one of those things. Like, I look at things as there's, we're all duplicitous, probably more like multiplicitous, to be honest with you. Every one of us has a Tyler Durden inside, you know, and there's a meme that I love, or that it says something to the effect of, you know, if you hear about me in town and someone says I'm a total jerk and someone else says you're the most generous, awesome, wonderful person, believe them both. Yeah. Because I can be both. And we all are. We're not all, you know, wonderful, awesome, you know, in every situation. We all have these circumstances that we can be different in certain circumstances. So I believe there's a little bit of truth in everything, and there's also a little bit of falsehood in everything. And we all get in this mindset of like perfection and wanting to, you know, be this certain kind of person. And the reality is that it's almost impossible to achieve, because we're just, you know, you can be different people at different times. So anyway, not to go down too far on that rabbit hole, it just kind of gives you a context background of, I guess, of how I look at things.
Yeah, no, that is definitely an interesting way to kind of navigate the waters of life, you know, so to speak, I think. And you are right. Like, there's, you know, slivers of each person's truth of you and view of you. And that's kind of what I've seen out of, you know, if it's a guest that I have on this show that I don't know personally, then I have no context. There's no contextual value of a pre-understanding of that person, right? But I've had some friends on, and that's where you start to realize that, like, wow, like I know a sliver or a chunk of your life, but like you've got this entire world out here, and this is friends of years and years and years, and so that really started kind of opening my eyes to the fact that, like, we all only know one person in that little small realm of their world, their individual world. And when you start to kind of take that and let that back on yourself and sort of self-reflect on that, it's like what you put out into the world, I feel like at times is good and sometimes it's bad. And sometimes you're so narrowly focused on whatever is driving you towards that, like, whether it's money or it's work or it's closing the next deal or getting the next inspection or becoming the best inspector in the county or whatever it is, it's like all of a sudden you put the blinders on and you're focused on that one sliver, and it's like everybody else is just periphery, right? They're just out there. And I've started to kind of like step back from that a little bit in a weird way. And I realize that, like, there's a lot of folks that from more of a professional level that may or may not know me on a personal level or hasn't had an interaction, but they might think that I come off a little bit as a jerk because I'm not the guy in the office or I'm not the guy in the public that's like, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, we're buddy. It's like, and maybe I should be like that. I don't know. I'm still asking that question every day. Like, maybe I should be more open to like other people, but I'm also so focused on what I feel like is the task at hand that sometimes I am like this. I'm like blinders.
Oh yeah.
Like I've noticed myself, like I'll go into the office and, I work for the Wells Group here in town, and there's like agents, I've been there for over 2 years. There's agents that I haven't had a conversation with.
Yeah.
And you think about that, you're like, wow, that's a dick move. Like I should go to their desk and be like, hey, I'm not a bad guy. And I'm sorry if I've like looked at you in the hall and just kept walking.
Right.
But when I come in here in this, in this Coliseum, I'm up against giants.
Yep.
Some like guys that have been in the industry, and I'm fighting and clawing and trying to prove my worth.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so it's like you do put these blinders on, but you say that it's like, so I take that in context of like, all right, let's go out to the world and ask this person, what do you think of Kyle? What do you think of Cody? And flip of a coin, they might go, oh, he's an asshole. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, am I? And then you go to the other person, he's actually super good dude, man. Give you the shirt off his back. And it's like, it's their perception of you in that sliver of a moment.
That's right. That's all they see, and they can judge you based on that.
Meet me at the lake
minute.
over a camping weekend, and I might be your best buddy for life,
right.
But it's like, so yeah, it's hard. And that does weigh on people. I don't know if that weighs on you, but it's like, I feel like if I've done something and it's like, man, I want these people to judge me in the best context. But just like we were talking about before, the comments, like good or bad, the good and bad is not going to go away.
And it only is good or bad if you see it that way. Because, in my profession, I'm a home inspector here in town, and have been for the last 10 years or so. Coming up on 10, this is my 10th year. And, just because of the nature of what I do, I'm naturally always in a juxtaposition between competing parties. And so I always think of it like this, like it's, especially to a realtor, if I'm speaking to the realtors in Durango and the area, that it's always good to keep into context that us as inspectors, we're always pitted. So let me just say it like this. Like when I was in the franchise, I just left my franchise a year ago this month. And when I was in that franchise, I was always the top for 4 of the 8 years that I was there. I was the top guy. And they would always send their guys to train with me. And what I would always tell them up front is like, first of all, look, don't take anything personally, because everybody that we deal with in the real estate world is in utter shambles in terms of they're moving. You know how it is to live out of a box. That's not fun in and of itself. A lot of bad things can drive the real estate industry in terms of what makes people want to sell: death and divorces, leaving the area because they don't want to, and it's health-related reasons or something like that. So people are always on edge just as it is. And so, I always tell people, don't take anything personally, because it's going to happen. So if there was one thing I wanted to help give perspective to realtors in town, is that as inspectors, just give you an example. So the average realtor does what? I think the national average is like 6 real estate transactions in a
I
year.
think it's less than that.
And give her,
4
let's say you have a baller year, and let's just exaggerate it for the sake of the conversation. Let's say you're rolling and you do 20 transactions in a year. In 2021, which was a banner year for real estate in Durango, I did 711 transactions, home inspections. And if you consider that in the context of numbers, that's 1,400, give or take, realtors, sellers agents and buyers agents. That's up to 1,400 sellers, partner teams, investor teams, husband, wife, husband, whatever. And then you've got same thing on the other side, 1,400 sellers. So if you can imagine in the context of like the biggest transaction that most people buy, and you have all of those competing interests, and exacerbated by the fact that in Colorado there's no standard of practice for home inspectors. So there's this ambiguity of the expectations are always vast. If you ask 1,000 people what an expectation of what a home inspection is going to be, you'll get 1,000 different answers. So you get all of those numbers and things into play, and take into context that if you think that given all of that I just outlined, you think that someone's not going to be upset with me at some point? Yeah. And then you take into account that all of those properties, and I tend to, my niche has fallen into the higher end market. That's the realtors that tend to call me when I look at metrics over the years tend to be the really big homes. If I'm looking at a group overall as a whole, I do $30 million homes fairly often, a couple a year. And so when you look at every outlet, every light, every wall, every shingle, every furnace, boiler, every dishwasher, and every single component of all of these homes, I'm eventually liable for every one of those things if I don't catch them or if I miss them. And so, I follow a process that makes me a pretty good inspector. It makes me pretty hard to miss things. In fact, if I would like to ask, like, what have you heard about Cody Petersen? Because I already know what your answer is going to be. A lot of times, I get called out for better or worse for being the more thorough inspector, right? You won't hear from an agent for a couple of years, and all of a sudden they'll call and go, "Hey, you want the best inspector? My dad's moving to town," and you're like,
"I'm on the buyer's
Is
side."
that a compliment? Yeah, or that, or in a buyer's market, all of a sudden now they want Cody, and in a seller's market they're like, "Holy shit!" Anyway, so I take all of that into context, and then you consider that. It also, I think, given all of that, it gives me I think the key is that it gives me a perspective that a lot of other agents don't have as far as working with up to 1,400 realtors in my Rolodex. I mean, there's 475, I think, in Durango. I work from Montrose to Del Norte to Farmington and Silverton and Telluride and all these markets. So I'm all over the place. So my realtor pool is up to 1,500 of them. And I do, on average, 500 to 600 inspections a year. And so I'm always dealing with all these realtors. And it gives us a perspective of who's really effective and why, and how they deal with things as realtors. And so, I love my partners. We have the best, I think. There's so many good. I could name dozens of them that I love to work with. And a lot of, I guess the difference is that between, and Justin Osborne really kind of helped me articulate this well, is that some of the best agents to work with are the ones that are a little more proactive, both on the pre-sale side before you even hire me and on the after effect. So if there was a mission when I'm trying to rebrand my business this year as Smart Move Property Inspections, when I used to be a Buyer's Choice franchise, is that I want to go out and talk to all the realtors this year and really just express like communication and how crucial that is and how rare that I get much of that. I think people are kind of afraid they don't want to, there's a conflict of interest inherent in the way that it's set up. So there's always this conflict that inspectors can't get around where our referral pool is the same pool that we could harm their deal that they've worked hard on based on me being an obstacle. And if you look at me as an inspector as an obstacle, I think you've already been behind the 8 ball. You're looking at it wrong. As a and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. Like I'm trying not to be, it's a delicate balance because again, we are relying on your referral. If I, as a person who markets to the end user, I could spend thousands, millions of dollars on marketing and it's going to be very ineffective, which is ironic because I worked at Google for 10 years, but it's almost 99% of the realtors that give us those referrals. And so we're relying upon you to give us your clients and trust us with them, while at the same time, anything that I find could be something that could be a bad deal for that client. But the way that I look at it is different. Is like, it's not necessarily an obstacle. What we're really doing, the goal really is to match the right home with the right buyer. Right. So if you can, before the inspection, give me the clues like, hey, these buyers are, turnkey. They want turnkey. They really don't want to mess around with anything. That's helpful to know. Not that I'll change my report in any way, but it helps me to tailor it to that specific person. So if you're a client of mine and I'm going through the inspection report, the first question I'm going to ask you is, where are you from? So that I can get context. We have states where, like in Texas, they're very, very strict about inspections, and they have to have page numbers on the right corner. Like, it's ridiculous. And then they come to Colorado expecting it to be the same, and we're the Wild West, man. I mean, there's anybody in it. I mean, my children could start a home inspection company tomorrow, and not one person would ask questions. So, it gets to where lost my train of thought.
I mean, there's a situation that I see it from a real estate agent's perspective, and the talk that has been going around the industry, because real estate agents in Colorado have to be licensed.
That's right.
So I come from a electrical construction background. I have a journeyman's license. I have a master's license. All governed and restricted at times by the state. Same things with the real estate's license. So now inspectors that had been doing, like, let's say radon testing, right?
That's right. It's a big thing this year.
Yeah, and so now you have to be licensed to do that.
That's
so
right.
I think there's like this common thread in the industry, because what you see on an inspection report, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And like you say, from a buyer's agent perspective, from a seller, I mean, we've all been on both sides of the table.
Yep.
And sometimes it is a absolute fucking deal killer.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's a deal
It breaks
killer.
my heart to find those too, and I hate it.
It's a deal killer sometimes because what I think, and I don't fault any person, I don't fault any inspector, but what happens is that when I look at it from a very like objective standpoint, and I go, okay, when I'm an SME, subject matter expert, right?
Yep.
I used to go in, and I won't name any names,
Right.
but I worked for a lot of heavy hitter agents, so to speak, in our industry. I would go in as a subject matter expert for the electrical side, where something was found on the inspection report, and I would go in to give a deeper look at it, right? Like, okay, well, this was found, this was struck, maybe it's knob and tube. Mm-hmm. Okay, right? And so
Seen it a few times.
yeah. And so the thing of it is like you go in, you kind of give like a deeper underlay of like what the problem is, right? And so I would say, in my professional opinion, X, right? Now, I didn't do any work. I'm not subject to them coming back and saying, okay, well, you made a statement. I did, but the thing of it is I never stepped foot on there.
That's
so
right.
my license in Colorado is different as an electrician.
That's
I didn't do any work, kick rocks, going down the road. You can say all you want about me, and because it's on my company letterhead, I didn't do any work, you can't sue me. This is a statement.
Yep.
And yes, it was in my professional opinion, but it's also, I didn't provide any services, right? My insurance doesn't cover that. I don't have,
Yep.
So what I think is again, going back to like, there's a common thread within the inspection industry within Colorado is that, you guys at this juncture, and I would think that this is subject to change here in the near future.
I
Just
think
the way that things
We're
are
one
going
of the last states that hasn't gone this route.
is that you guys don't have to have a license that's
right.
governed by a state entity.
That's right. Unless you're now radon testing. Now DORA will say we'll oversee you and have gone from 0 to 100 on that.
Yeah, but that's radon specifically. So what you see in a lot of reports is opinion-based statements.
That's right.
At this moment, without actually being, whether you're the best in the world or the worst in the world, it doesn't matter. An opinion-based statement without being a true subject matter expert
exactly
dictated by the state.
We're generalists.
Exactly. And so that's what I think. And whether those statements are made with the best intentions, you know, it could just be like, hey, this could be mold. I would suggest maybe getting a mold test.
That's right.
That statement right there, even though there's no malice behind it, you guys are not trying to destroy
You've already
a deal.
read massive flags.
You have said the words.
Yep.
And it was
So
like,
you better be accurate.
I didn't mean it like that.
That's
You
right.
know what I mean?
Well,
and all of a
that's
sudden
the-
a
that's
buyer from out of state goes, what do you mean mold?
Yeah, that's
I'm like,
right.
hold on. He didn't say there is mold.
That's right.
But that's
Suspected.
a lot of agents in the industry are going, why are these statements on here? Why would they ever put that? And I'm like, well, in a sense, they might have to do that to kind of cover their own ass.
Well, a little
You
bit.
know?
And that's the thing that a lot of inspectors can go too far on.
Sure.
So there's always these extremes, and that's the big difference. And a lot of times I don't think we compare our trades colleagues on paper comparatively. The only question I ever get asked is, when can you get there? And occasionally, how much is it? And at the end of the day, price really isn't as big of a factor as you would think it would be. But anyway, that's a different story altogether. But, you know, my job as an inspector is to be accurate from my perspective. I think the most important thing is to be accurate and neutral. And as a generalist, that's where that comes in. And that's where that appearance of trying to just cover my ass comes from, is that I am only a generalist. And when I train guys that come from the trades, if you were an electrician, now to be an effective inspector, you need to stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And you need to reel that back in.
Yep.
Because if I go in there and blast trying to find causality, like this is a problem and this is maybe why, that's where you step out of the lane and put everybody involved liable, potentially liable, because I'm not in my lane. I am not a licensed and certified electrician. I am a generalist as a certified inspector, period. That's it. So the way I put that is, you always got to leave an out for the guy who's going to come in and do the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I go in there with big boy pants on and I'm Mr., I'm accurate and I'm Mr. Important Guy, and that kind of, if I take the inspection and approach that way, I'm going to lose. I'll be sued.
Yeah.
I'll piss everybody off and all of those things. So for me, it's a delicate balance, and it's always a fence post that we ride. Because, I'm confronted daily with the ethical dilemma of, oh boy, this one's going to hurt. Now that I found this, I'll give you a quick example. I was in a $6.5 million home last week. And, when I walked in, is a relatively new buyer's agent. And as I walked into the property, the buyer's agent said right away, hey, we got to keep it kind of easy on these guys, because we've negotiated down to a price that they can afford. They're kind of at their max. So let's try to be easy. And I'm always like, okay, I appreciate the heads up, because I do want that communication, but it's always a little awkward when they pin me into that, if you see something, let's not say anything about it. Kind of wink.
Yeah.
And it happens far more often than I'd like to see it happen, but it does, unfortunately. And so I walked upstairs. This was an 80s house that had been retrofitted in-floor heating system in the mid-2000s after the fact. And so the very ironically first cabinet that I opened in the kitchen was a manifold for the plumbing system, for the heating system. They all come together in a manifold. And so very unlikely to actually see the tubing coming in, but I was like, I see polybutylene. It's the first thing I see, and that's a really bad deal for in-floor heating.
For those of that don't know, can you explain?
Yeah, so polybutylene is a recalled product that is known to cause issues over time because it gets real brittle and it'll eventually break. So it was in vogue and fairly There's between 95 and 2005. That's when a lot of these high-end homes that were in that time period where in-floor heating was really in vogue. And unfortunately, there's about 4 or 5 plumbing products that in that decade era are known to cause problems. And one of those is Kitech. Kitech is frustrating as hell because it's probably not ever going to fail, but they have formally recalled it. So it becomes this contentious issue with
very much so, yeah.
with resale value and insurance companies. And then you've got Intran, a Goodyear product that's garbage and it is going to fail on you. You've got polybutylene, it's the same thing. It's not an if or when. It's like it's gonna happen. You're gonna be like, it's a bad deal. I had another home that in the same area that a year ago had polybutylene. It's very rare to find polybutylene in floor heating. I find it oftentimes in trailer homes, to be honest with you, as they're branch plumbing to the sinks and showers, but you rarely find it in floor heating. And it's such a detrimental thing because that is going to be a problem. It's all encased in concrete. So you have two options when I find this. You either abandon the heat source and introduce a new one. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
You know, retrofitting in a forced air or in a $6 million home, you're adding baseboard heaters or even hydronic baseboard heaters. Like they want that sexy in-floor heat. They don't want. So it becomes an issue. So the one home that I had the example of cost over $300,000 for them to jackhammer up all the flooring, take up all the flooring in a multi-million-dollar home, jackhammer all that concrete, put in new tubing, and then put down nice, sexy flooring again. It could be a big deal. So when I find that, if somebody asks me, what's the worst thing you find, you're going to expect me to say some of the horrible things that you probably see on my Facebook page if you follow me. I like to post things. I've learned to wait a year. But anyway, that's a hard lesson I had to learn. When I find that, it's like, this is gonna suck. And then it gets exacerbated worse because then I go to the boiler and they have a Weissman boiler. And it's for a 4-year period of time between 04 and 08 or whatever it was of this year of Weissman, is under recall for a known O-ring that fails and causes a gas leak. Mm-hmm. And so here I am staring at this boiler that's pissing gas out at me. My meter's freaking out. And I have to answer to my insurance company. I have to answer to you or sellers and protecting their home. I have to answer to the neighbors to make sure they don't blow up the home. The NFPA, OSHA, InterNACHI that certifies me. There's all these agencies that dictate how I have to handle that situation. I have zero discretion. I have to turn the boiler off so that it doesn't continue to piss gas. And in the middle of February in a $6 million home with a hydronic heating system, with a known monster of a listing agent that's sue happy, she's threatened to sue me several times. I already know this is going to go badly, right?
Sure.
And I have no choice but to do the right thing, the fiduciary duty that I was hired to do. But unfortunately, a lot of times as inspectors, we get confronted with that. And I'll give you just one other quick example, and then I try to get off this subject because I don't want to be too disparaging to what I do for a living. I want to uplift the industry is my goal. I want to make inspectors better. I'm involved with a lot of them on the back end that people don't see. I do a lot of things. Probably I'm not a very good politician, so I'm not as great at some of that stuff as I should be, and I've had to step away. But at any rate, the example I was going to give is that I hate it when I do this.
That's okay. The discretion, you have zero discretion with the.
Well, so yeah, I mean that was one of those examples is that I have zero discretion, but I have to turn that thing off and take care of the people involved. But then I get blasted as being this overzealous or the gas leaks. I don't mess with. I've seen enough problems with those you should take seriously. Yeah, and it's an easy thing to fix. I mean, anyway that example aside, it's just it can put us in those compromising positions. So the example I was going to give is that there was another time years ago when I first started that we were doing this huge home, 14,000+ square feet monster. It was beautiful. And these people wanted, I think it was kind of smart, and it's only happened once to me, but they wanted to see what 2 inspectors would say. So they hired 2 of us. The unfortunate part was that they hired us to be there at the same time. So it's kind of stupid. They didn't get what they wanted because, of course, we're just talking. And so it was early in my career. And again, Kitech is one of those things that I hate to find because you probably never have a problem with that product, but yet you're going to have problems with your insurance company. If you do have a problem, they won't cover you a lot of times. There's all these things. So I'm thinking to myself, here we are. I've got this other inspector that I rarely get to talk to my peers like that at that point. I've talked to them all now, but, and I was like, so, hey, when you find Kitech, what do you do? And he looks at me and he goes, are you out of your fucking mind? I ignore it. I act like it doesn't even exist. If you think that I'm going to put the 4-5-letter word Kitech on my report, you're out of your fucking mind. I want to work in this town.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God. Like, how do you not get sued?
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with, we were in an extremely expensive home, and that demographic can be very litigious because they can afford to be.
Sure.
Like, they're not the people you want to mess with.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking to myself, like, oh, wow, like, okay. So to me, it comes back to several things that is the way I run my business, several things that you've said in your podcast that is why I wanted to be here and really dig what you're all about, is that at the end of the day, this podcast you talk about a lot of times isn't about money. I'm not chasing the money on it. And that's why it's very likely that it could take off, in my opinion, because I think there's always like people that think in terms of the law of attraction. And I have this personal theology and thing that I work out in my head all throughout my life that I one day will write a book about. But I actually think it's the opposite of that. The law of attraction wouldn't be a thing if it weren't something that we as humans are actually trying to get away to fight out of something in order to achieve. So it tells me that the reality is it's probably the opposite. And so the harder we try to do things, the opposite happens. So when we chase money, a lot of times just for the sake of money, you probably, unless you're lucky, it can happen, but you likely is not as likely to happen because you're focused on the wrong things.
Sure.
If you chase doing the right thing, if you chase your passions, if you chase, helping your community, the money will certainly follow you. And that's been my business mantra, the number one, since I started. I always figured if I just keep my head down, ignore a lot of the noise of, some of what we've been talking about, are you a picky inspector or are you not? Or, some of that things, like, I have to remind myself that do the right thing and the people that get it will come.
Sure.
And the money will follow. And that has proven to be extremely successful for me.
Yeah. That was really tough getting into the real estate industry. Like when you first started,
I
I
can't
talked about it a
imagine.
few times. Like you don't make any money.
That's
like,
why I
and
didn't go that route.
They tell you, 6 months. No, you need to have a year's worth of savings.
Oh yeah.
Especially now.
It's probably more like 3 years, really.
Yeah.
The first in a lot of those like financial planning, and they kind of always talk about that first 3 years as the building.
Yeah. You got to really build your business, and you got to work. Like, I mean, I have said it off record so many times. Like, I have a personal disdain for part-time real estate agents.
Oh yeah.
I can't stand
Same
it because
with me for the
I look at
inspectors.
this and I
There's
go,
those two.
like you're looking at, we're coming into the potential, like depending on what article you read or what real estate agent you talk to or, banker, it doesn't matter. Like we don't have a crystal ball. Who knows what this year is going to look like? Who knows what next year is going to look like? Are we going to go into a recession?
Right.
Are the Feds going to say, you know what? Sorry, guys, we fucked up. We're actually in a recession.
Oh, I know.
Who knows? We don't know that. But
This year's crazy.
the reality of it is
seen.
like so many people got into doing real estate because it was so
easy.
hot topic. And it was, you could literally put a sign in the yard and
That's
sell
right.
it. And then all of a sudden I'm doing all these numbers and it's like people, you see people be like, I'm a real estate agent doing this. But
Osborne will say you didn't do that.
The market did that. Yes. A million times he's told me that.
That's
but
right.
The thing that kills me the most is like, let's just look at our local agent to people ratio. It's like 1 out of every 10.
That's right. If
in
you're
the
not in
county.
real estate, you're in a restaurant industry
Exactly.
in this town,
right?
and that's it.
But the reality of it is, and the top of the top, if you can get them to talk to you, here's the true reality. The top 20 make 80% of the money.
So absolutely.
They sell 80% of the homes.
Absolutely. And it's probably, and I always say 80-20 rule. I always go joke and go, it's probably more like 90-10.
Yeah. But there is no top agent that does not do this 9 to 5
That's
or 9 to 9.
That's right.
That's the reality. And like, it bothers me when people are a part-time real estate agent because either their parents are affluent or they came from an industry and they just kind of want this break of a job. And it's cool, right? It's
They
like,
see people making money.
Yeah,
and
I'm
it's-
a real estate agent, and maybe you sell a couple $1 million homes a year and you make money. But when you have those agents, especially when they're new, like myself, and there's a couple of other that I've really befriended that are new in the industry, and they're doing this as a career, not as a cool hot. I got into real estate because I was so depressed that I needed an out.
Yeah.
I was so just destroyed mentally and physically, and I was sitting alone in a hotel room in Montana because I had quit a job at BP. I had left what most people perceive as one of the best careers that you can have in the oil and gas industry,
Yep.
you know? And I left it because I didn't feel good inside. And so I went to go to this crazy job in Montana to make freaking, you know, $18,000 a month. And I was going to work for 3 months and then have enough to just kind of figure out, well, I didn't realize that I was just sitting in my own misery in Montana. My family was in Colorado. You know, we were working all kinds of hours. There was nothing to do because it was brutally cold. You got in the hotel room and you just sat
I lived there
there.
for a year.
I was just so destroyed.
Yeah.
And my friend at the time was still a real estate agent. And he's like, why don't you just do real estate? You know, but at that moment, it wasn't like, I'm going to do this for a career. I got into it because I needed to do something that was completely out of my wheelhouse and do an absolute about face on what my career for 17 years had been.
Yeah.
So
it's good to do that reevaluation.
Taking all
Love
that
it.
into perspective and then getting into this and then just literally, I mean, hammering as much as I could my first 6 months to getting one shit land deal south of Ignacio.
Yep.
And if it wasn't the market that we were in, I've told Justin this so many times, I probably never would have got my first sale had it not been that market. But when I tasted the contract,
Yep.
you know, when I tasted
to
that
that
like
closing
energy
table.
and like all that, it was a nothing.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was like $800.
Yeah, but
and I was
still,
like,
though, you know?
but it felt so good.
Yeah.
It felt so good.
Oh, for sure.
But the reality is that was like, this is what I want my career to be.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be a joke. And that's when I made the mental shift because
All
again,
in.
going back to the,
That's me. If I'm not all in, I'm not.
imposter syndrome,
That's
right?
right.
At that time, I was very reluctant to tell people that I was a real estate agent. I almost felt like a little shame about it, you know? Because like, I mean, there's like the running joke at town, like, oh, you're a fucking real estate agent.
Right.
You know, but
You
now
and
I'm
everyone
like,
else.
yeah, I am. And
Yeah.
you know what? I am a damn good real estate agent.
And
I've
that's
only
what'll
been in
make
this
you a
business
good
for
one.
2.5
That's right.
years.
That's what-
But you talk to anybody who actually knows me, whether they've been across from me or whether they've worked on a deal with me or whether they're a client, like I will be good at this job. And so it really, really gets under my skin when I hear a person talk about this industry. It's like if you were, I mean, and I'm not giving a relationship between a real estate agent and a doctor. But what I'm saying is that if you heard a doctor be like, oh yeah, I just do a couple of, splints every few weeks.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's winter. I'm
How
taking most of the
confidence
winter off.
inspiring is
Yeah,
that?
exactly. So it's like, I don't like it because now you've got all this ability to market to the masses.
Yep.
And you see some agents that are half-wit at best and super, super part-time. All of a sudden they're listing a $7 million home.
That's right.
And kudos for them.
Oh,
I'm like,
can't tell you
good
how
for
many-
you. Good
that's
on
right.
you. I'm so glad you got it. But that's what kills me when it's like, and the reality of it is this year's going to suck.
Oh,
This
yeah.
year's already started out hard for a lot of people.
It has. This
know?
week is seeing a big change for me in the best that I've seen since October of last
Yeah.
year. This week is starting to show signs of life again, but you're not kidding. I mean, it has gone from 100 miles an hour to 0 and off the cliff.
Yeah.
And you remark about that comment, but it does drive me crazy as well. And yet at the same time, it's very hard for me to be, I'm a pretty direct person, and I kind of just, if I have something like you on my deathbed, no one will ever say, I didn't really know what Cody felt about me. For better or worse, you're going to probably know. And I had an agent that was just like you described a couple of years ago. And he had made me wait. It was a several $1 million home. And this isn't exactly that guy's demographic. And told me the key would be there. And we waited for 2.5 hours to get in. And the buyers are sitting there stomping, and they're now getting frustrated and thinking this is intentional. And I've got a second one to get to, and I want to get home to see my children and all that. And so I kind of, when he arrived 2.5 hours later, I was like, bro,
Yeah.
come on, man. And he looked at me and he said something that I'll never forget. And it totally turned me off so hard that I was like, well, if I don't ever hear from that person again, I guess it's not that big a deal. But he says, man, I'm just trying to make as much money as I can with doing as little as possible.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what the if that's your mode, wow, bro. I mean, I don't jive with people like that. I'm all in. Like, I want to do it right. Like,
Well,
if
know it.
If you're going to do it
Yeah.
right. Otherwise, why just go fucking golfing? Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Like, I mean, it. Like, when anybody's first starting out, I know that we all have to start somewhere. And those folks that get lucky, I call it luck.
Oh, it
That
is.
that
Especially
somebody
in the
picks
last
up a
couple
phone
years.
and they're like, oh, hey, or they call off a Zillow or whatever the case. Like, kudos to anybody that does get those kind of homes or that gets it, whatever. Like, more power to them. But you see it in an instance.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, I've only been in this a short time, but I know when an agent's brand new or they don't care.
Yeah,
they don't care enough.
same.
When I see the contract,
That's exactly the
if I'm
problem
the seller buyer,
sometimes.
it doesn't matter.
Yep.
You see that contract, and I've done enough deals now to where I'll push back.
Yep.
I'll call and be like, clean this shit up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry.
Well,
Like, do you want to get a deal done?
It's hard for me to do that because I'm relying on you guys.
Yeah,
So, but you know, but I
it's-
see that.
But the thing of it is like, I
So
didn't
often.
think about that. Like, we'll just catch it in an amendment. No, fix it now
Yeah.
on the front end because we're just going to create more work for both you and I.
right.
But
right.
so that's my pet peeve within our own industry is like, I don't have time. The time is so valuable and so fleeting.
Especially
I
when
don't
we're
have
so busy
time to
like
work
that.
with people that I appreciate when somebody wants to work little and have this enjoyable life. I get where they're coming from, but I'm trying to build something bigger and better than myself.
That's exactly
in some which way or the
key
other.
right there.
And this real estate tool and the people that you meet through those interactions, already there's a spiral.
Yep.
And it's like you get the rare opportunities every once in a while. Bing, okay, I work with that person. And it was like light bulbs, like we just matched, and you meet these clients, and so it's like that
see how
nuance
well
of like
it
the
can work.
yes,
Yeah.
the interactions is like
can be really great.
when somebody comes into that fold, and it's like, oh man, this is a struggle. This is going to be a struggle because you don't care enough.
That's right.
And I think that puts your buyer or seller at such a huge deficit day one.
Right out of the gate.
Because it's like,
And then they're
all right,
throwing fingers at anyone who is
Yeah.
an obstacle as
Yeah.
opposed to, well, why don't you take some negotiating classes or call me and ask me, how do we overcome this Kitech problem? And I'd
Yeah.
be happy. I hardly ever get these calls
Yeah.
sometimes. But again, you've got all these agents and you know who the top ones are. And then after working with them, you can go, oh, I know why that is.
Sure,
I can tell
absolutely.
you why so-and-so is making what they're making because, again, we'll go back to Osborne's, proactive versus reactive. Like if you see my inspection report as an obstacle, you've lost the game already
Yep.
because that's not what this is. A bad inspection report to a guy that is looking for a deal is a gold mine.
Sure. Yeah.
To the right buyer, that's wonderful. The more things that they can negotiate off the things that I found, that the better it is for them on the front side. In addition, like it's, if you're trying to match turnkey with the right buyer, then I mean, don't put them in a home that.
Or
I can tell by the driveway sometimes the way the day's going to go. Like you guys, you've seen enough homes. Like, don't blame me when the inspection report looks like, you're wanting turnkey and you send me into Dolores to this, 200-year-old home that's been a rental for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the other thing too, it takes people some time. It takes people some deals, some failures, some fall flat on your face, and be like, oh God, I barely escaped that one. And I got out of it and learned from it. And it takes time to kind of like build the ability to talk to your seller and go, hey, I'm going to tell you a story about the best $750 you will ever spend.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is it? It's a pre-inspection.
I know.
Because the thing of it is,
Less than
I know
3% of my
I know that
work
we want to
is
sell it,
pre-inspections.
right? And this goes down to
Less
like a
than
$250,000 trailer home.
Yep.
Guys, I know you don't have the money. I know you don't have the money. But when somebody gets in this and they have their heart dead set on this, and oh my God, it finally meets my pricing, meets my pricing category, and I'm going to be in it from the buyer side, they're saying that, and then they get this inspection report and there's all this stuff wrong.
Yep.
However, if you had just spent that money up front and maybe you don't have enough to fix those things, but what we can do
Now
is we
you can address it.
We can be open and honest and direct and upfront and say, hey, you know what, guys, here's a pre-inspection report. And we do know what we're going to do is we're willing to offer a concession to correct those things. Or
That's right.
we'll reduce our price up front and say, these things were found.
Yep.
But from a new agent perspective, and I can personally speak to this, it's hard at first to do that because
You're asking for problems.
you're not wanting the money. It doesn't
way it
matter about
seems
the
like.
money necessarily at the end, but it's like, I want to sell this house. I want to do this. And so it's like, you're basically taking all the direction from the seller
Yep.
or the buyer, whatever
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
And so you're not actually doing
Driving
your
the
fiduciary
ship.
job.
That's right.
Yes.
You're letting
it
them
takes a
persuade you,
while. It
and they
takes
shouldn't.
time.
That's
it
right.
takes, it really does just take time. But that's also the other thing is like, if you're not doing this full time,
you don't catch
how many
those things.
opportunities do you have to make mistakes, learn from mistakes, correct them on the
If
next
a
one?
full-time agent on average does 6 deals a year, these part-time guys might do 1 or 2 a year. And I get those calls sometimes. And you're like, oh,
Who the fuck can survive on 6 deals a year?
This is gonna, this is gonna be a long one. But it's so crazy to me that less than 3%. And I run metrics every year, and I'm a metrics nerd. I look at numbers every week, and less than 3% of my business on average year over year is pre-inspections. And it drives me crazy because if you want to keep your listing price, do a fucking pre-inspection because you're far more likely to keep it than if you don't. And now you've got, I can't tell you how many, I just got a call yesterday for a person who in Bayfield here was under contract, and they fell out of contract because of the inspection report, and they would not share that inspection report with them. So the sellers now have no idea why. And they're falling out of contract. So of course on the MLS, that looks wonderful, right?
Yeah.
You're dazed on the market and all those things. And people are wondering, if they do, as buyers can want to continue, now they have a vested say in how that work gets done, and you lose control. And as a seller, like if you did the pre-inspection, we can find those problems up front, deal with them. And I'm the inspector that will say, hey, you want to know what all these items are. And you also want to use this as a marketing tool because it can be a powerful one. So let's give you a blast of all the nitpickiest shit I can find and put everything on the summary so you can address each one, take a snapshot of it, send it to me, clean it up, and then I will remove that from the report, and we can present the best case scenario based on the actual facts of what it is. And now you aren't caught with your pants down going, gosh, I never looked in the basement. I had no idea there was mold down there. And really it might not be that big a deal, but it's going to sound like one if it gets caught under the other scenario, which I can't tell you how many hundreds, thousands of times I've seen that exact case. I mean, I was just talking to Keith Thompson yesterday, and he was talking about a job that he had inspected. It had Kitech plumbing. He had inspected it like 5 freaking times.
Yeah.
And it's like these sellers aren't disclosing it, and they're hoping for a roll of the dice for someone who's going to be ignorant and won't find it. And you're just like, all right, so how many thousands of dollars were spent on inspections on that one home just to get to the same result, which is, well, this sucks. I agree. I get it. I understand. But I mean, I didn't put it there.
That's the other thing too. And, hats off to Osborne is like, he's, and others within the Wells Group office is like, he is very good at saying like, look, you can be there's 2 types of agents. You're going to get the deal done because that's what both parties want, or you're going to fight so hard for one side because of your ego, and you're going to let your ego get in the way, and it's going to collapse the deal. What kind of agent do you want to be? And it's like, that doesn't mean cutting corners. What that does is that means like, look, you brought a buyer to my seller, or I brought a buyer to your seller. Both parties at some level want to do the same thing. They want to buy or sell or buy. Both agents want the same thing to happen. So when you go to the negotiation stance, it's like there are certain agents out there. Our industry knows who they are. Names do not even need to be said.
That's
right. If you're listening to this, you know who I'm talking about.
You already know. I can tell already. I know who you're talking about.
But the thing of it is like we all want the same thing. We can all work through this in a very copacetic way. And it's like that is the other thing that is a deal killer, is like, especially like when a buyer's agent says, okay, we don't want to disclose this. Instead of just crushing the deal, it's like, well, hold on. What is the problem?
Yeah.
What is is it now, if it's cold feet or interest rates went up and you didn't get the 30-day lock like you're supposed to, that's a shady deal. Yeah. That is not acting in a proper manner.
You're looking to get on the back end, something coming back that isn't going to be fun.
Yes. But the thing of it is like, if it's just like mold or it's this or it's whatever, it's like, well, bring it to the table. And instead of just being like, boom, boom, iron fist, like on the table, we want $14,000, take it or leave it or walk. Right. It's like, hold on. Okay, guys, look, we bought the house 3 years ago. We put a deck. We have this much equity in it. We can't take a loss, but what can we do? There's all kinds of things.
What can we do to make it work?
Okay, maybe we can find a way to do a little bit more creative finance that actually helps out your buyers, or so many people just they want to run the entire communication scheme, right, of the contract and the negotiations. They want to be that agent. I'm the bulldog. I'm telling you what's going on, my way or the fucking highway. And it's like, okay, cool, buy.
Good luck with that.
You know? All right. Awesome. How do you think
People want to
that's
work
going
with
to
people
make
they like.
yeah. How do you think that's going to make the other side? And we're supposed to have a fiduciary responsibility. And if you're good at your job, you do. But when you come to me and say your seller or your buyer is this and I'm running this son of a bitch, you know, what do you think that's going to do? Do you think I'm going to be able to personally take off that hat and wipe my feet at the doormat, you know, for lack of better terms, and go in and talk to my sellers and be like, you know what? The agent's great. He's a really good guy. These buyers seem super great. You know, not mention the 1 hour yelling fest we just had. You think that I'm going to leave that at the table and go, hey guys, I think we should, you know, bend over and really just let these guys, you know, take all of our money, all of our proceeds or pay more or whatever. That's the thing that I believe that if more agents could get on that, and just being like, yes, we all want the same thing to happen. Like, you know, same thing with like, how does an agent interact with a, you know? I
want people to move into those homes. I think people think that find something and they go, oh, here comes the bifurcated tail and the pitchfork and I can't wait to. And there are inspectors like that. There's literally there was one that used to be. It was a female, and she used to call herself the deal killer, and she was all about it and was proud of it. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like,
what are we doing?
I don't want to be a deal killer, but I also don't want like my job is to. You don't understand. Like, if this is done correctly, I'm there to protect you. Like, I'm your umbrella on both agents' side, regardless of who hired me. Like, what a lot of clients don't realize is in the state of Colorado, because you don't have the DORA regulations, is that the only person with a signed contract that says if anything goes wrong throughout that inspection process is the buyer.
Yeah.
Like it falls back on them if I burn the house down.
Sure.
And don't do the right thing and don't have insurance. And I mean, that's why I focus so hard on providing that world-class service that does the things despite the requirements. I mean, I have a buyback guarantee on a $30 million home. There's no limit. I don't care what the cost of the home is. Within 90 days after closing, if you buy that home and you have to go back to Montana and live with and take care of your mother-in-law, or you found mold, or I had a guy in the Glacier Club that wanted me to buy back $1 million home because he found a black thumbprint on a mattress, came fully furnished. Like, I don't inspect mattresses, brother man, but but if you want me to buy back that home, I want that story. Like, I have a guarantee. I will buy the home back from you at the same price you paid for it for any reason. You find a shitload of mold that I didn't find and it's $150,000 mistake, I'm buying that home back from you and we're taking care of it. So, I mean, find another inspector that has that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's crazy.
So, I mean, you know, I go through these stages of like, I just want to do it right. Mm-hmm. And then you hear through the grapevine sometimes, you're just like, okay. I mean, I did my job. What do you want me to do?
It is what it is. I mean, the fact is, if the end all be all is like, if that report is disclosed, you know, this goes back to open and honest, straightforward communication.
That's right.
Like Keith Thompson.
That's right.
You know, I love Keith.
No, he's a
great guy.
I talk to him all the time.
I have been so mad at Keith at 9 a.m. in the morning and being like, calling him like, what the fuck, Keith? Yep. This is going to be a deal killer. Same Keith. I have to meet him at a house at 11:30. And I'm like, hey man, I need you to look at this, you know, do your thing. Right. So it's just, it is part of the business. But the thing of it is like, if you have a little bit thicker skin, but also can say, look, how about this?
You do have to
the
have
statement of mold is there. Both the buyer's agent and the seller's agent see it. Can we hop on a phone call with Cody? Can we hop on a phone call with anybody?
Please.
And say, hey, I know this was going on. Do you think it's something where we could get mitigation in? Or do you think, you know, or
I say it 100 times.
Can we get back to it? Can we get a subject matter expert in there and just look at the electrical? Like, you know, was the case with me. Like, I stopped doing it because of this one deal on a house on 3rd. You know what I mean? I've worked with the agent after that, and she's a great friend. We've done deals together. It's great. But at that moment, I stopped doing SME work for any real estate agent because I found active knob and tube. Yeah. And my professional statement on my letterhead,
you will not get insured with that.
I was like, here's the deal. This is active. It is operational. It's only for about 1/3 of the house, but
about 5 times I found it.
It's going.
It's rare, but
you know, I also made the statement, and I know this personally because the house that I rented when my son was born, the entire home was still on knob and tube. It's on West 3rd.
Yep.
Okay.
I know a bunch of them. I did
16th and West 3rd.
I did a huge commercial one that
There's
was
a
full
lot
on
in there.
knob
And so
tube.
the statements made back from that agent were like basically bashing me and saying, hey, this is da-da-da. So the thing of it is I was actually working for the buyer's agent.
Yeah.
I wasn't, but my report was sent over and disclosed. And all of a sudden it's just like, well, no, I was like, I have full on remodel work that I've gone in and taken all the lath and plaster down and rewired the entire house. And I was like, if you want proof of that, I was like, fact of the matter is, and that letter went out to the email string that I saw. And at the time I wasn't an agent, right? This was 5 years before. It went out to 100 real estate agents. Be like, do you know who this guy is? He's basically going to destroy this deal. And he's saying that there's knob and tube. Thankfully, there were other agents who had enough dignity about themselves to say, yes, we actually were under a contract 6 months ago and we found knob and tube on West 3rd, or we found knob and tube over here. It's not often you see it because as people move in, they remodel. But
I can say it about 5 times.
The fact of the matter
career.
is, it's like it is out there.
It's out there.
Sometimes you find
And you better not miss it.
Yeah.
Because I see it a lot, and then the remnants are there. And if you don't put a contact list on there to see if it actually is live, a lot of times people don't know, and they're like,
Sure. They just
we thought it
assume-
was addressed. I had a guy come in and go through, and he's supposed to have fixed it all, and yet I'll find a string of it covered under insulation, which is super dangerous, and be like, that shit's live. I mean, I did a huge commercial building. It was the Masons building in Montrose, and it was not only full-on knob and tube that was live throughout that whole complex, but the buyers wanted to make it a concert hall for a hotel that they had bought across the street. So they're going to pump.
Yeah.
They're trying to make this thing.
They kind of need a
down
ground,
the street,
huh?
and it had this huge, beautiful skylight at a stained glass up top, and it had 100 amp CFL bulbs. There was over 50 of them on one 20 amp circuit, fucking live knob and tube.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you guys turn that light on, you will burn this place to the ground. And what's so funny about it is I was on the roof and they had built this big elaborate thing over this old building to protect that.
Yeah.
So there was kind of like this false skylight over the false light. And I'm up there in this little room investigating. I pop out and I look, and the neighboring building is literally burned to the ground. Like
God.
There's nothing left of it. And I go back downstairs and I was like,
Just walk away.
you guys,
Walk
I know
away.
you, like, I know
Inspection's
you,
done.
I know you, well, and I'll do that. I'll find that kind of thing and I'll be like, look, I can save you a lot of money today. You pay me for a little bit of my time, but if you want to cut this inspection report cut right now based on this finding, then
Yeah.
let's do that. So at any rate, it happens. And I can count on my hand how many times I've found live knob and tube, and it's a point of contention so much every time that it's like, look, we know that that's one of those that is significantly serious enough that you won't get insured. Yeah, I mean,
That's the problem. That
I always look to the insurance
that
agencies.
became the problem is that now the buyer has a letterhead with my name on it and
That's right.
signature. There's knob and tube. But the reality of it is I had definitive proof.
Yeah.
Definitive proof.
Yep.
However, it was like, we can redo this portion and you're back in action.
Yep.
Ultimately, that deal collapsed. They went back
what I
under.
always
Who
tell
did they
people.
call? The
Yep.
subject matter expert.
That's what I always tell people.
So it's
You
like
can-
we got through it.
Yep.
But that going back to the previous comments of like, we can work both sides.
Yep.
Instead of it being a pissing match, let's just get to the middle. Everybody wants the same thing at the end of the day. We want to
anything
buy
can be
or
fixed
sell.
with time or money. Anything that like nothing should be freak out about. Anything can be addressed with time and money, and it just takes that. How much of that do you want to deal with? Is this going to work for me if I do put in that time and money? And that's all this game is. It's really not, as sinister as some might approach it
Sure.
as being, and it really, really is. And I tell people so often that it gets obnoxious when I do a dissertation with a client and we're talking about the report, and I say it over 100 times in every one of those 20-minute conversations. If there's any questions, please call me. And I tell every agent, just call me. Here's a great example. Some of the best agents that I work with have given me shit so often about my reports that they've done me a service of gratitude. I'll even tell you his name. Stuart Siegelson up in Telluride is one of my favorite realtors to work with. And he's a no bullshit guy. Like half the time I think he's pissed at me, but I love it because he's no bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, and so he says to me one time, hey, what is this garbage about serviceable that's in every line of your report? What is that? Some kind of legal jargon what does your boiler is serviceable mean? Does it mean you can work on it? Is there a problem with it? Does that mean that that's good? Like, what is that? That's garbage and I hate it. And I was like, I have never thought about that.
Yeah.
And I can assure you, if you find the word serviceable in my report, I'll give you a $500 bill for every time you find it, because it won't happen. Yeah. And it was like, you're right, this is garbage. And so sometimes I think there's, again, that perception of conflict of interest that does exist. And it's so funny to me because some are shameless about, they don't care. They'll compromise that and tell me things. I get it a lot more often than you can imagine.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Take this off the report, or, I had a person that it was brand new construction, 3-bedroom home, and the 3rd bedroom was a closet that they had the electrical panel in and all that. And so I asked the builder, how the hell do you get a CO on this when you can't put a closet right on top? The NEC is kind of doesn't fuck around.
Yeah.
You can't put a clothes closet on top of an electrical. So essentially this isn't really, I'm not the assessor.
Yeah.
And on my report, it doesn't say anything about this. I'm just saying that's not really this bedroom. It's not a clothes closet.
Sure.
And I was threatened, you're going to get sued so hard if you don't take that off the report. And I just go,
yeah.
You know what? Have your lawyer call me, because what are you going to do?
Yeah. What are we supposed to do?
I know enough about what I'm doing now, tenured enough. I mean, this game, it's easy to be the new inspector because enough inspectors have pissed people off that, somebody's going to be mad and giving back to that 1700 scenario. There's always going to be haters out there, and I'm thankful for them. Mm-hmm. I love my haters because it makes me better.
Yeah.
Like if you're just always trying to please people, especially in my business, like it's not the right way. Something's wrong. You're either not doing jobs or you're intentionally overlooking things to save face. And unfortunately, we do know that exists. There's several examples. I don't want to go into. Anyone who's talked to me knows the examples of inspectors in this town and others, that it's not just a Cody problem or a Durango thing. I'm in a lot of forums. I sit on a lot of committees, and this is certainly a very distinct, just part of every real estate transactions business. I don't care where you live.
Yeah, for sure.
So at any rate, I don't know. All I know is I love what I do. It's the job of my lifetime. I've had a bunch of really, really bad jobs. I worked at,
I was going to ask, so you said like for a minute, you were like, I worked at Google. So what did you do at Google?
In 1992, I came to Durango for my first year, typical college student. And then that was the year that we got the huge snowstorm. So we got an extra spring break.
Oh yeah.
Which may or may not have totally derailed my college career. But at the end of the day, I ended up on Dead Tour. Followed the Grateful Dead for 2 tours after that, and I worked as a construction guy here in Durango for a couple of years until '96 under Rich Knowlton. My buddy Pooh Knowlton does some of the best. His concept is really high end finishes on really small homes. Freaking love it. Nobody ever does that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I moved back to Denver to get the good job, right?
Yeah.
And coincidentally, that's where I was born and raised. Grew up in Denver, Lakewood area. Leaving Denver, it never looked so good in my rearview mirror. I'm such a fan of Durango. I've heard you talk about it a lot. But at any rate, so I go back to Denver to get the good job, and ended up through a couple of transitions. I land this job at a company called DoubleClick. DoubleClick, if you're an internet advertising nerd of any kind, you already know they have 80% global market share. They're the monster. 80+% of every ad or pop-up ad or anything that goes down on the internet came from DoubleClick. And so when they were a New York-based company, and they had all their servers hosted in extremely expensive Manhattan high-rise real estate prices. And they're like, stupid. These server farms can live anywhere. So they moved it to Brighton, Colorado, and they hired a shit ton of us all at the same time. And that's where I met my wife, Dawn, beautiful wife, Dawn, I've been married to for 20 years. And that's where we met. So worked there for several years. In 2007, Google bought DoubleClick out, and now I'm a Google employee, and with the stupid little hats, the spinner hats, and all the Googler. Anyway, super gluttonous type of environment. As far as it only takes probably 100 people to serve most of the billions of ads in the world, and they make so much money, it's insanity. And so a good click-through rate's essentially when a banner ad is served, the click-through rate is how many people actually go, oh yeah, I'm interested, and they click on that. So the behemoths of the world, Coca-Cola, Subway, those kind of advertising monsters, they enjoy 0.3 to about 2.5% click-through rate. That's considered a good campaign. When I was working there, which was early 2000s, the majority at the time, a stat that I always loved to shock people with, which was true and horrifyingly not awesome, was that the majority of websites that exist were porn sites. So pornography is what really, if you look at it from a standpoint of what funded the internet, it was certainly pornography, because a pornography site will serve an ad, and instead of 0.3 to 2.5%, we'll enjoy 50% click-through rate. And every time someone clicks on those ads, someone's making money.
Sure.
So it's a gluttonous environment. And so as a result, first being hired in tech support and then later into advising and sales, the majority of my job every day was dealing with porn. And you know, I'm a Christian man. I'm not someone who's going to come on and proselytize about the ill effects of porn. But you know what? They are real.
Oh, sure.
The way it rewires your brain, the way it makes you then look at the female partners in our lives, and just there's so many things that I could talk about that I could do the whole podcast just on that.
Yeah.
But it's not just that bothered me. Here's the real kicker, is that it's one thing if pornographers are targeting people that are looking to enjoy porn, right? You're an adult, you do whatever the hell you want. But the problem is that when you're trafficking these ads, you would expect keywords like, and I'm sorry to be vulgar, but it is what it is. You would expect on these porn sites to have keywords like dick and ass and pussy and, you know, shit like that.
Yeah.
The unfortunate reality is that they would keyword things like Mickey Mouse, Britney Spears. I date myself a little bit with those examples, but like whitehouse.com back in the day was a bestiality porn site. And you can imagine how many, you know, kids, middle school, are going to, do a report for school, and they go to whitehouse.com instead of whitehouse.net, and they get a horse doing some chick instead of the government's White House page. And so that's all very intentional. I was in in Las Vegas when we finally decided this was not going to work for us. We were at one of those conventions, and I was. And I'm sitting there listening to this guy talk about how if we can get a child under the age of 10 to inadvertently see a porn ad one time, they're like some egregious number, like 80% more likely to be a porn consumer for the rest of their life. And I had just had my baby girl Sierra born about that same time. And it just started to destroy me. What the fuck I'm doing for a living.
Yeah.
And it just, what am I doing for money? And I'll never compromise my integrity again for money, because I know what it does to a man. And I'll never do it again. That's why I am the way I am as a business person. Love me or hate me for it. I will do the right thing. Always.
Yeah.
So at any rate, I looked at it and was just like, I can't, you know what? Let's take our children and let's move to Durango and raise them in a ski town, like was always my dream. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no plan, and we didn't even care. We were just like, you know what? We hate the city. This job is beaster. It was a good job, but it's, you know, it goes back to that opposite theory I have. Like, if you're a company that's saying you're all about integrity, run like hell, because that person they're only trying to sell you that because they know they're deficient in it. That's the nature of rhetoric.
Sure.
I have a degree in communication, and that's the reality of persuasion, is that if you're overly trying to persuade, if you Facebook people that are like, my husband and wife, we love each other, and that's all they post about, probably because there's something behind there that isn't necessary. They're trying to convince you of something that might not necessarily be true.
Yeah, what's behind closed doors.
So, we were like, I can't do it anymore. And we came to town, and I had a couple weird jobs. I worked at, the PCS was a company in town. They did Aloha for the restaurant industry, and the former owner died in a horribly tragic and just unfortunate accident. And so they were looking for a sales rep. And so I did that job here in town for a while, which I loved. It's where I met incredible humans like Dave Woodruff and other guys you've had on, and just Sean and some of the guys at Steamworks. And I mean, there's just Tim Turner over at, there's so many great restaurant owners in this town. And I got to meet a lot of them, and I did really well as a salesperson. You'll probably find this funny, but I was told after a year of doing that you're overselling and you need to take a step back. We can't keep up with you. And I was like, you're telling me as a sales guy, like I'm doing it too good? Okay. So, I got a job at Mercury for a little while and ended up getting fired at Mercury. I was in the gift card sales department, and I hated just sitting there smiling and dialing, and I couldn't keep my mouth shut. My buddy Bill always would tell me, shut the fuck up, Cody. And I just couldn't do it. There were certain things anyway, not to go down a road of that. Mercury's a great company. I know, I actually went to school with the CEO and know him real well. But anyway, I was fired from that job, and I remember coming back to the desk and my peers that were sitting there, and they were like, oh my God, what's going on? This is what's going on. I was like, I don't know anything other than this. And I have to give you a little context. Like, I had just closed on our house in Durango West, literally yesterday.
Yeah.
So I just closed on a house. I got 2 children to take care of, and I get fired from this job. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this the best thing that's ever happened to me. And here I am now. It's just so in gratitude for the success I've had over the years. And it's worked.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.